Hi, welcome to video. Today we're going to talk about the idea that it takes 10,000 hours to master in a field such as guitar, and whether that's accurate and whether that's even a fair portrayal of what the author, Malcolm Gladwell, who originally put this idea out in one of his books, intended. So first let me deal with that. So in interviews with Malcolm Gladwell, he said after the book came out that things were being misrepresented, that he didn't necessarily intend them the way they were. He never intended 10,000 to be a hard and fast rule. The idea of 10,000 hours originally came from looking at chess masters back in the 60s and seeing that they pretty much always took 10 years or more to reach a master status. And then he looked at other fields and saw similarities. Now, so at 10 years, he was estimating on average about 1,000 hours of practice, and that's where the number 10,000 came from. So 1,000 hours of practice is between 2.5 and 3 hours a day of practice. So if you're serious about something, that's a fairly common amount that people might be practicing. So it was more, he said, a symbol or metaphor for how much commitment it takes to master any cognitively complex field. Or in other words, he just wanted people to know that you're not going to master this in a few months. If you want to become a guitarist, as a teacher, I see this a lot of time. People will call me up before our first lesson, sometimes say, how long do I need to take lessons to learn guitar? And I don't really know what to say, because it's like, well, how good do you want to become? How quickly do you learn? How much are you in practice? There's so many factors that go into that. But here's the thing, there isn't a point where I don't even like the term mastering something such as guitar or being an expert in it, because you're going to spend your whole life improving on it. And if you think, well, there's a point where I master it, where I'm an expert now, that implies you don't have to keep practicing or learning, and that's not the right attitude to have. And you also don't want to say, well, I can't do something because I haven't mastered it yet. Most professional players, I would say, when they start off playing professionally, have not put in 10,000 hours. A lot of teachers have not put in 10,000 hours when they start teaching. I'm not saying that the more practice, the better, of course, but you don't have to hold yourself back. Be the best you can be at the level you're at. And people will be at different levels within those amounts of hours of practice. So another thing that the author said in the interview was that retroactively, if he was writing the book again, one of the things he would have delved into in a lot more detail was the difference between quality practice and quantity, and that they're not the same. So it was kind of the assumption that it was fairly good quality practice when he was writing this, but a lot of people look at it as purely quantity, and that's inaccurate. So let me talk about some of the things that will have an effect on how many hours it takes. So the one good thing about the 10,000 hours is it kind of just gives you an idea that, yeah, it's going to take a while. And then say, but how can I move that along? So one of the ways is your quality of practice. So if you're doing focused, deliberate practice, which involves pushing yourself to try new things, learn new things, go out of your comfort zone, pushing yourself to become more efficient on the things you're playing, to find your weaknesses and work on those, not just play things that are your strengths. And I did a whole video on how to continually progress. I'll put a link up in the corner, which will also put a link in the description. So check that out. I'm not going to get into as much detail because I did a whole video talking about how to keep progressing. Another thing that will affect how many hours it takes you to get good is having feedback from someone, just like athletes have coaches all the time. Musicians having either a mentor, a more experienced guitarist who can give them feedback, or a teacher will help your progress hugely. Without that, a lot of times you might make the same mistake for 6 months, a year, 10 years, and not know it. And if you would just correct that mistake, you could have gotten better a lot quicker. Or it might be holding you back. A lot of times I've had many students come to me who have been playing decades who say, I've improved after the first couple lessons more than I've improved in years, because they just were in a rut of doing the same thing and they had bad habits that needed to be corrected. Now, you can have feedback from anyone who's experienced, but I would say the best is from a teacher. And the reason for that is if you have an experienced guitarist giving feedback, They might be a very good guitarist, but a teacher who's experienced knows what it takes to learn, and they've seen lots of students move through it, so they don't just have their personal experience, but they've got potentially hundreds, maybe even thousands of students that they've watched progress and know what you need to get better and when you need to learn that. So you can't really replace that. Now, nowadays there's so much information available. Yeah, you can learn a lot from videos and online, but having feedback from a teacher is still beneficial. Another thing that can affect how fast you progress and how many total hours it's going to take you to get to a certain level is your personal aptitude, talent, genetics, learning ability, any of those things, which to me all goes together. I mean, it's whatever you want to say, it's how fast you're able to pick up things and learn it. Does it take you seeing something once and you can do it and understand it, or does it take you 10 times before you do? Now, I think while this affects the total amount of time it takes you to progress, I don't think in the big picture it's important, or not that important. I would take a student who has strong commitment and perseverance over one that's talented any day, because too often I've seen talented ones that are lazy and don't want to put the work in, even though they pick it up quickly. And I've seen people who struggle and fight for every improvement to, in the end, become better players. So while of course it's best if you have talent and all those other traits, but you don't need it. I don't think I had any natural talent, personally, on guitar. I got better through hard work and through studying and practicing. So it might take you longer to get better, but in the end it doesn't matter whether it took you 10 times of seeing somebody learn it or one time, if in the end you learn it. So don't be hard on yourself thinking, well, I'm not talented enough, or I don't learn quick enough to become great, because you can. Another thing that will affect how long it takes you to progress, and this gets back into efficiency of your practice, is not doing too much rote repetition. For example, if you're playing through a scale, just, some people every day, they just warm up by playing the same scales, same exercises over and over. If you can do an exercise, or you can do a scale, or a chord progression, or arpeggio, or anything, or a song, to a point where you're usually not making mistakes, you can play it efficiently, you can play it correctly, you're not going to get better by repeating it. You're largely wasting your time. You can use it as a warm-up, sure, but you could be warming up on something that actually challenge yourself, and you'll get better much quicker. It's not that you'll never play a scale again. Of course, you're going to be taking a scale, the same scale, and you're going to be improvising it. You might be practicing it with some sort of sequence pattern, or intervals, or any number of other ideas that is still practicing a scale, but you're making yourself better by challenging yourself and practicing it a different way. Don't keep practicing things the same way over and over and think you're going to improve, unless you're improving your efficiency, you're memorizing something new, or something like that. I mean, the only time you just do that rote repetition of just going back and forth on something is when you're still making mistakes, or you're not doing it efficiently, or don't have it memorized. Then it has benefit. Once you have all that stuff down, you're clean, you're consistent, it's not really helping you anymore at that. Do something that's more challenging. Okay, and that will cut a lot of time off. So many people always say, keep in mind, if you think of that, again, 1,000 hours a year, if you make your practice 10% more efficient, you just saved 100 hours off that time. They either gain their 100 hours quicker, or you have to do 100 hours less practice to get to that same point if you're more efficient. Consistency is important too. A lot of players, students I've had, maybe let's say they're going to play 3 hours a week, but they might play it all in one day, or in 2 days. You'd be better off doing a half hour a day 6 times a week than 3 hours in one day, because by the time you come back a week later to do that 3 hours again, you will have forgotten a lot of the stuff you did before. By doing that half hour a day, whatever you're doing, but doing it consistently, the same amount of time will give you more benefit, because you won't have to relearn stuff every time you come back to play. You'll remember it from the previous day and can build on to it. So, an hour 5 times a week is much better than 5 hours once a week. So again, quantity isn't always the main thing. Another thing, what constitutes practice? Does watching a video like this constitute as practice? When I was younger, I'd say no, not at all. But because there's a physical skill and you need to actually practice. But let me say something. If like you watch that video I mentioned, and it allows you to become even slightly more efficient. It's I think a 15-minute video. If it makes you 1/10 of 1% more efficient, that's 10 hours in a year if you're doing 1,000 hours of less practice you have to do to get the same results. Over 10 years, that's 100 hours. So was watching a 15-minute video, if it saves you 10 hours a year of practice, worthwhile practice, then yeah, I would say that counts as practice then. But if you're watching someone argue about what band's best, yeah, that's not going to make you any better. Something like Bruce Lee used to do. He would do the things that don't require any mental energy, like stretching, but was still necessary for his martial arts, while he watched videos on martial arts or read books on martial arts. That way he was activating both his mind and his body in something that I would say either one separately doesn't really count that much as practice, but together you get more benefits. So multitask yourself. If you are going to watch something that's mostly just talking, do some rote practice that you still need work on, that maybe you haven't built up the speed you want or the consistency in your playing. So that's when you can get more value out of your practice time. It does stuff like visualizing things count as practice? I would say to some extent yes. You still, because this is a physical thing, you need the time synchronizing your hands and developing that skill. But you can work on things when you don't have your guitar. If you have your guitar, always use your guitar. But if you're away from home or not in a place where you can play your guitar, visualizing allows you to think about fingerings of scales, chords, arpeggios, notes on the neck, theory, all these other things help memorize things. So visualizing can be beneficial, and I'll put a link up in the corner talking about that in a different video too. So I'd maybe count it as like half as good as practicing with your actual guitar, but definitely better than nothing. So that's one thing, is maximize your time you have. If you have your guitar, play for fun, yeah, but also practice things with goals and with that will make you better and that will improve the things you struggle with. Don't avoid things that you have a hard time with. Instead, focus on improving those. And then when you don't have your guitar, that's when, yeah, you can read, you can watch videos, you can visualize things, and that will add to your, or cut down your total time that you need to practice to get good. It will improve your playing. So, hope this kind of helped you think about some of this a little bit. And yeah, 10,000 hours, there's no magic number. You're going to keep improving. Don't stress about it. Put the work in, get better, and be happy with where you're at. And we're all getting better. I'm still learning new things all the time. And doing these videos is one of the ways I do that. So if you like the video, please like, subscribe, any of that stuff, so I can get more views on my videos. And thanks for watching.